This presentation is going to be followed by a special treat. So our ninth presenter is Leticia Letty Luckstone in Second Life, speaking about Immersion as Heart Dimensional, Confessions of a Storyteller's Journey to Gamify Learning, another very good title. And once she's finished her presentation, she's planned this special treat, a visit to the immersive experience, the Queen Heroes of the Five Kingdoms. So I'll let Letty do her presentation and then take us on our trip. Letty?
Thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me.
Yes.
Hopefully there will be no glitches. Hopefully. Hello, everyone. I'm Leticia de Leon, and my presentation is on gamification as a learning framework, which I have been honing for several years. My journey is not about gamification as points, badges, and leaderboards because it does not focus on extrinsic reward systems. My students are pre- or in-service teachers motivated by doing worthwhile activities related to teaching. As their professor, I learned from them that gamification can be a powerful motivator if story is used not as a distraction but as a metaphorical representation of the journeys they undertake in teaching. I propose that immersion is not three-dimensional but heart-dimensional. This presentation is my journey into the dimension of the heart, which makes storytelling the most important aspect of gamification and immersion. Immersion is a sense of immediacy and presence, an abstract concept that is generated by involvement and identity. As if right there in the action. Immersion can occur in any setting with the right conditions. Immersion is another word for flow, the psychology of optimal experiences. Games can create flow through curiosity and challenge. Essentially, immersion and flow occur as a result of tapping a personal core drive for the heart to connect to the circumstances of the experience. In this diagram, flow and immersion are depicted between anxiety and boredom. This state is nurtured by several conditions to engross one in the task. Learning in a flow state has nothing to do with a grade or points earned, but with how we connect to the task and involve ourselves in an immediate way. Story helps provide those conditions. Csikszentmihalyi determined that 3 of the 4 ways to create flow are associated with suspension of disbelief and story immersion. Different combinations of these game types can be an interesting way to brew a story to create flow in gamified learning. Agnostic games are played for the sake of competition and challenge, not with story flow. Aleatory games are played because they make us feel in control of some vague future. This causes flow because it allows us to metaphorically right a wrong or solve problems beyond our present solutions. Vertigo games cause flow through altered consciousness. Vertigo is the strongest sense triggered in 3-dimensional spaces. This is why many of us are fascinated by exploring locations we could never conceive of designing ourselves. Mimicry games cause flow through play acting at different roles or identities. Our interests in mimicry evolve with age and changing responsibilities. In some ways, Second Life avatars satisfy a sense of mimicry. Now that we've examined the psychological reasons for using storytelling in gamified learning, it is time now to consider the human motivation element or core drives. Finding the right core drive for your learners in a storified game is about understanding the topic and the learner. The diagram above is an adaptation of Cho's Octalysis core drives. They describe 8 human drives to motivate a player to continue in the game. This suggests that to immerse learners in a gamified story, one must tap what is in their heart through meaningful and relevant experiences. People of different ages and life experiences have complex motivations, so that core drive determination can be difficult. However, the type of person that will want to seek out the content of your training or course will be determined by your topic or learning goal. When determining relevant experiences, ask yourself 2 questions. 1, what do my learners care about in the topic of this learning? And 2, why do they want to learn it? These 2 questions help you determine core drives and how your story will be developed in hard-dimensional ways for your learners. In a gamified learning environment, the story elements are like those conventions used by storytellers in novels or films. To make your games immersive and cause flow, you need 3 elements: character, setting, and a problem or goal. Together, they work as gears that turn to a common purpose, a story for gamified learning. This list of story elements is incomplete. It is missing elements of plot. However, a gamified story is guided by the decisions and actions of the players. Therefore, plot elements are self-created and not always defined by the designer of the storied game. Next, I will describe how story elements can be created and used in a gamification environment. Character in gamified learning fits 2 types: the player as character and the non-player characters that advance the story or problem. Cho described the first core drive, epic meaning and calling, which can be tapped by making the player a character hero or defender. As humans, we all want to be something bigger than ourselves. The player as heroic character provides a calling. Additionally, creating the player as character role is connected to the problem. If you gave players as characters a calling, then there must be a problem they can face to meet it. Because a story in a gamified learning environment is intended to trigger learning, the problem created for the player as character should be metaphorically like what learners might need to do with the content. In my gamified environments, I've given my student players roles that include forensic archaeologists and coders. These character roles paralleled what they may do in real life. This provided a calling bigger than themselves while also connecting them to reality. Adult learners need that connection. Non-player character roles should be one of mentor, assistant, or victim, depending on the kind of story created. I typically use only one non-player character to help advance the story, like a mentor. Non-player characters can be created out of narration, images, or virtual avatars. Previously, I mentioned that knowing the type of person that would immerse in your learning experience will help you to design the story. That means the story should be guided by a goal that metaphorically represents a problem that your learners may face. Such goal and story should also match and extend the metaphor when creating the role of the player as character. In my graduate research course, where in-service teachers were forensic archaeologists, their problem was to investigate the remains of a school. Both the characters and the problem were metaphorically related to the real topic of the course, research. I paralleled the forensic archaeologist role with that of a teacher-researcher to investigate problems in schools. When my students became coders, the problem was to break free from a controlling computer that was dehumanizing society. In this course, their goal was to learn to gamify using human-based design with core drives presented here. I paralleled the idea of coding with instructional design using gamification elements. Regardless of how potentially fantastical the problem is, it must hold a kernel of parallel reality or truth. Most importantly, the problem in a story game should be actionable, important, and relevant to the real life of adults engaged in it. The setting should give the sense of time, location, and circumstance. In the previous examples, gamification occurred in a learning management system. The setting was created by aesthetics and multimedia narration. The hard dimension does not depend wholly on three-dimensional stimuli. A setting can be just as evocatively created using narration and images. In my learning management system, the sense of setting was created by combining elements of the problem into a design theme. For the forensic archaeologists, I created newspaper template and a reporter advanced the learning and the story. Even the buttons and icons used helped create the setting by using archaeology tools and adopting a color scheme that related to the problem. Deciding what your story problem is will lead you to determine how you create the aesthetic design. I rely very heavily on Pixabay for free images and on Photoshop and Illustrator to design my own buttons, icons, and templates to advance story problems. Another way to layer a setting into a learning management system is to build it in Second Life. Then record your non-player character there. In the instance of the coders, a Second Life avatar was recorded in a futuristic dystopic world using appropriate garb to imply the time and circumstance of the setting. The students never entered Second Life, but the aesthetics in the learning management system matched the recordings. They believed it existed, which is what the heart dimension needs. How you create the instructions in your course also creates setting. Your instructions can be in a newspaper story or in a lost recording from a faraway bunker. Setting does not need an actual place. The final gamification component helps in the building of story to tap the heart dimension. Simply because it brings all the elements together in an order that creates learning. Although I have discussed each of these elements of story and gamification separately, they overlap during the actual experience. In this slide, you will notice a series of activity loops. Each of these is a task in the story game which has two purposes, to learn and to engage. A teacher may call them scaffolded activities where the learning and the story are both advanced by first presenting the goal, then issuing the challenge to be completed, and finally receiving some feedback. This activity loop repeats like chapters in a story, but it also makes it clear that the story does not advance unless the player as character takes on the challenge. Feedback at the end of an activity loop can be a verbal or nonverbal, simple or complex. It can be narration that has been preset to indicate success or failure in the challenge, or visual stimulus like the appearance of an image. These can be created with learning management system conditional content releases. To gamify learning, it should seem effortless, like blood pumps through the heart. Yet if these key elements are missing, the heart dimension will not function appropriately to connect to learners on a human level and to provide meaning to the experience. Stories can be escapist, but in gamification, they should keep you in the created reality. This is the heart dimension. Thank you.